All right, we're going to get started again. This is our final 1 hour on what needs to be done. We've been talking a lot today about multi-faith actions, the need for people of all faiths and beliefs to pull together and work together in multi-faith fashion and work with their governments in multi-faith fashion. But we really, if we want to change the game, we need not only multi-faith, but multi-sector co-creation and collaboration. So you heard from academics just before the coffee break. Now we're going to talk about corporate initiatives and then media initiatives, and then kind of open it up to you all in the audience to see what other new ideas that you have on what we can do to increase our impact. So for now, I'm going to introduce Simran Stuelpnagel, and he's going to introduce a couple of his colleagues. But come on up, everybody. We're starting the Global Academic Council. You heard. We're launching a corporate council, which you're going to hear about now. And Simran, over to you, and you can introduce your panel, and we got 20 minutes or so. Thank you, guys.
Einen schönen guten Nachmittag zusammen. Wunderbar, dass Sie hier sind. My name is Simran Stuelpnagel. I am the chair of the corporate council. And I have with me an incredible panel, and I really mean high octane and corporate high octane, and you'll see why, because this thought leadership, the relationship between religious freedom and corporate realities exists. There are brilliant people thinking about it, but we haven't linked it to our civil society movement or to our government engagements really well enough at all. In fact, sometimes it feels like they're two separate conversations, but we're going to clue you in to what those conversations look like and feel like on the corporate side. And then later today, tomorrow morning, and over the coming weeks, months, and years, we'll work together to actualize this bridge. Greg asked me to chair this corporate council after a company started by my father, and some of his friends, 2 hours east from here, was awarded the most faith-friendly company in Europe. And we didn't know we were that faith-friendly. We just lived our values, really. But that was last year. That was Yogi Tea. You have it in your bag. Some of you know it. It's now our house always smelled like tea. For a long time, I didn't like it. Now it's the largest herbal tea company in the world. It used to be packed in our basement. It merged with its U.S. counterpart anyways, and Ava from the Marriott School, who I will introduce in a minute, said to me earlier this year that if you can turn a corporation into a religious freedom ally, it's like starting 100 NGOs. Now, I am the vice chair of the Earth Secretariat. I know the incredible work and the convening power that this has, but if a corporation comes to the table, how does that change the game? That's the question we have to ask. Yogi Tea is a relatively small company. Still, we got 100 billion tea bags into teacups. And the reason they did that is because when the German post-World War II hippies took Eastern religions, they started experiencing faith discrimination in post-Nazi Germany. Go figure. My grandmother has my family history traced back 1,200 years in Germany, but as soon as I put on a turban, suddenly I couldn't serve in the military. Suddenly, it was difficult for our community members to get jobs. And even my first name is Johannes, which is after John the Baptist, who I revere. But they wanted to name me Simran, which the German government of the 80s said is not an appropriate name for a white German boy. How could you name him something foreign, whatever? He would have to have a German name. That's 1980. We talk about the Holocaust Memorial next door of the 40s. That talks about what happened here in the 40s, but this is the 80s. So they started this tea company and confronted that by getting into people's teacups. And by getting messages of love and peace into people's teacups in German, those messages on here. And I just opened the first 5 out of this box, and I just want to tell you what a corporation can do when it starts messaging religious freedom. And it's more powerful than social media in the first 5 minutes of people's morning. The first quote I pulled was, One way of loving your neighbor is to reassure them. One way of loving your neighbor is to reassure them. You can put that in the context of every one of the conflicts we talk about and think about here, and it makes perfect sense. And the Germans that wouldn't let me have a Sikh first name had to wake up in the morning and drink their favorite tea and look at that. The second one, you can inspire others with the grace of your compassion. Is there a faith here that doesn't understand that, like, to their core? The third one, there's no road to love. Love is the way. The fourth one, every child represents hope for the world. I told Ben, I hope I don't cry when I go through these, and I don't feel like crying right now, so that's good. But I was voted class president in 6th grade in my school in Hamburg. And I didn't get invited to a single, and I mean a single birthday party in the 6 years that preceded. So the same kids that can vote me their class president will get told by their grandparents that that boy isn't coming over. Now, apparently, every child represents hope for the world. And then the last one I pulled, these are just the first 5. Smiling leads us to peace. Okay, 100 billion tea bags, I think, did contribute to the softening of society. And when we got that most faith-friendly company in Europe award, Greg asked me to chair this corporate council last year. This year, Rolls-Royce got the award for the most faith-friendly company in Europe. And as I joked earlier, we don't really know why. There's a prayer in every cup. Obviously, we'd be way more faith-friendly than Rolls-Royce. And what we figured out is people probably pray to get a Rolls-Royce, so there's some association. But there's many corporations that do this, and some do it way better than Yogi Tea, including the organizations that are represented here. So with that, I wanted to introduce this panel, and we're going to talk about their companies. Our first panelist is Eva Witesman. She's from the Marriott School of Business. Now, Marriott was started as a maybe not a faith-friendly company, but it was started by people of faith and of deep faith. And she spent the last 7 years researching and understanding how companies can bring religious freedom into their corporate strategies. So there's a 7-year research project, I had no idea it existed, into how this even works. And she has hundreds of examples of companies trying to do this, and sometimes doing it well, and sometimes it actually backfiring. So we have a body of knowledge in this corporate council. Ben Christenson, who's here in the middle, has a 20-year tech career, and that's important for me to mention because he says he stopped wearing suits and ties because he doesn't want people to think he's the intern. He looks very youthful, but he has a long career in AI and startup, and is a founding partner at xventures.ai. And we would kid ourselves if we thought that AI wasn't going to change this conversation for all of us. It will. This movement, our universities, our NGOs, our corporations will have Kodak moments unless we pay attention to this, and we pay attention to this very, very closely. For 11 years, Ben was at SAP, which is Germany's most valuable company. No company has a higher market cap no German company has a higher market cap than SAP in the stock market, and that firm has the largest set of business processing software systems in the world. A market leadership position they have to defend, especially with the onset of AI. And Ben was instrumental. He led global partnerships in one of those AI verticals and was instrumental in bringing faith into that conversation and then building a multi-corporate coalition to do this across the sector that included companies like Microsoft, Google, and many of the others. And we have a surprise guest who's Sam Curtis. He's not on the board, but he is going to be a little bit of a bonus commentator. He lives here in Berlin and understands the application of AI within sensitive commercial environments. He's advised some of the largest banks in the world, and is the European strategy lead for Diversity Atlas, which works very closely on data management and understanding of diversity with Amazon and many, many others in the European regulatory environment. Okay, that being said, Eva, right over to you. We think here, and I heard this yesterday in the academic council conversation, that there is definitely a link between corporations and religious freedom, but that link deals with what happens inside the workplace, and it probably should deal with funding the religious freedom movement, and maybe it has something to do with investment. But I think your last 7 years have showed very clearly that the field is immense. And would you please frame this for us? What does religious freedom mean in relationship to the corporate world?
So I want us to think about sort of what you first think of, and I think Simran just named some of those, what you first think of when you think about the involvement of business in this issue. And usually we're thinking about what can happen inside of a business. We can think about the philanthropy or the dollars that corporations can give us. We might think about investment or political advocates who are posting maybe on social media about this issue or that issue to their very large platforms. And then the other thing that I hear a lot is the influence that corporations can have on governments. And so we're sort of bringing them in to our shared civil society space, our shared government space. And when I say ours, I just want to back up for a second. I do teach MBAs, and I teach business, and I study business. But my PhD is actually in public administration and policy analysis. So I'm sort of bilingual. I may not speak Arabic and English, but I do speak business and civil society. And I'm really happy to be here to talk about that and to frame it in this conversation. Because I think what's so important is that we think about business not only as individual entities that can do things inside themselves or with their CEOs, but we need to think about business as an institution, like civil society, like government. We need to think of it as an institutional actor that brings more than just money to the table. Simran talked a little bit about the way that, that his company has brought these moments into the lives of individuals. And if we think about the marketplace as something that is much like civil society, people vote once a year, but they make decisions about how to spend their money every few minutes, right? And they're voting with those dollars or euros or yen, and they're making choices that influence the world, and businesses provide the platform for that. So if we can think about businesses as a partner that is an institution, and corporations as a representative of that larger institution, I think that is a healthier way to begin this conversation, because otherwise the way that we tend to interact is through regulation, taxation, boycotting, asking for funds, and investing. Those are sort of the limited tools that we have when we think about a business as an individual entity. But when we, and from them we hear, you should run more like a business, right? I mean, I don't know how many NGOs or governments in here have heard that little gem. But if we think about markets as an institution and we sort of expand out a little bit, all of a sudden the way that we interact and the conversations we can have are different. So now we're talking about markets as a social space, a space for civil society, both inside the company and between companies and their customers and other stakeholders. Now we can start to talk about economic development as peace building. We can talk about the way that corporations can help us to build long-term sustainability in societies, because when you have sustainable ways to support your family, and you are not fighting against other people who seem to have more or better than you, but you're focused on supporting your own family, suddenly peace seems a little better, right? Trade itself can be viewed as peacemaking. When we have global supply chains that rely on one another, we open conversations and we have an incentive to maintain peace with those nations. That's one of the reasons that so many of the treaties that we engage are treaties around trade, right? And why economic sanctions matter. But the reason that economic sanctions matter is because they're putting pressures not necessarily just on the governments, but on the businesses that support them. So we can go directly to those businesses in conversation. And then finally, there are other elements of business that aren't necessarily represented by the corporate side. You've got things like entrepreneurship, where much of the world's effort in building economies is around the entrepreneurship of individual people, often women, to be able to build stability and economic growth. There's marketing and the influence that companies have when they outwardly present information to people that we consume in every possible medium every single day. And then the last one that I'll mention is that companies influence one another because of their competitive drive. If one company, you actually heard a little bit of this with Simran just a minute ago, his competitiveness with Rolls-Royce is like, I want to find out what they're doing that beat us out this year. This is how companies think. They want to learn what other people are doing that's good, and they want to do it better. If we want innovation in this space, we can unleash the institution of business and competition to our advantage. So those are some of the ways that I would shift the conversation, maybe from a little bit of how I've heard it in the past.
So Eva, why would companies want to have this conversation with the rest of civil society? How do we get the dialogue to stick?
So there are two big motivations, and they're kind of linked, but there are two big motivations for companies. One is that they want to make a lot of money, and that's what they're taught to do. That's what's expected of them. And if we can link the stability of global prosperity to their individual interests, that's an easy thing to do. So global supply chains, they want to be able to hire people from all around the world to do good work for them. And it requires peace and stability to be able to do that, and peace and stability require religious freedom. It's a natural connection. The second one is moral. A lot of people just want this, and they want to use the companies that they have either started or that they work for or that they lead for good. So two big motivations.
So we think of corporations as faceless evil that goes around and exploits. You're saying that's not necessarily true, obviously.
Not usually. Not usually. And I will also say that those that are really economically motivated, I have been surprised. Most of them actually believe that they are doing what is in the best interest of their countries and of the world by maximizing profit. Like, that is generally what they genuinely believe. And so being taught ways of thinking about this that integrate those things can sort of bring out the best.
Okay, so we know, I'm going to stay with you, Eva. There is dozens of ways companies can do this. They can do it through marketing. They can do it through supply chain management. Media organizations are corporations. They can do it through communication. They can do it through who they promote, who they lend money to, how they understand their markets, who gets health care, under what circumstances, and on and on and on. There is a myriad of ways. Let's dig right into one of them. I want to talk about slave labor. And slave labor, we don't have to be so nice about it. It backfires, I think, sometimes, this desire to do good or this corporate drive for money. We know, for example, that in Myanmar, the genocide against the Rohingya, a lot of this room is intimately aware, leads to people walking, having killings, rapes, carrying their 100-year-old parents, for days through the jungle until they get to Bangladesh, where they end up in refugee camps, and they end up working for who? And what happens there?
So when you think about companies that are hiring people, they're looking for skilled labor, and they're looking for labor that they can get at lower than market prices if possible, right? They want as cheap as possible so they can pass on those savings to their customers, but also so that they can increase their profits. So what happens is you get people who are now religious refugees all around the world who can be exploited by companies that I was just extolling the virtues of, right? These companies are going to say, you need a job. You need to support your family in this new place. We can give you that job. And they're trained to think about how to save literally pennies. This is what they teach in MBA programs, like how to save pennies. And so if they can hire people at less than market wages, that's what they're going to do unless, and there's a big unless here because there's an opportunity, unless they can understand, number one, that is sort of immoral. Like we can start there, and they're going to learn that how? They're going to learn that being in dialogue with you. Okay, that's number one. Number two, they're going to recognize that immoral actions like paying less than market wages are going to put their company at risk. The very thing they were trying to do by saving money, now they're threatening it, because now they're threatening global boycotts and all kinds of media about how evil they are and what wrong they've done. And we saw this with companies like H&M. We saw this with Zara. We see this with Tyson Foods. There are all kinds of companies that have made this mistake. And by being in conversation both with us and other corporations who've made that mistake in the past, we can change what happens.
And I want to say that so Ben and Ava are members of the corporate council, and our approach is cooperative engagement. It's not name, blame, and shame. We're not going to go out and tell everybody who's good and who's bad. That tends to not really be true anyways. It's much more nuanced. So you're talking about cooperative engagement. Last question for you at the minute. Even this is complicated. Even that backfires. You have children that you pull out in these places. Okay, a refugee, a survivor of a religious genocide gets to a safe country that's also praised for accepting them, and then gets paid 30, 40, 50, 60% less than everybody else who works in the sweatshops. But then you get to children and our initiatives against child labor and post-genocide child labor. Briefly, what happens?
So taking that same narrative, right, you have child labor. From the perspective of the families, these children are contributing economically to their family. And then you have companies who are sort of outed by the global community and saying this is exploitation of children, which is a reasonable claim to make. They boycott the company pulls out of either this practice or the community where that practice is commonly happening. And one of the common next steps is that the family still needs these children to contribute to the family economy. And given no job opportunities through companies or corporations, they end up being engaged in human trafficking. And so we end up losing these children to a market that will deal in child labor.
So this child labor and child sex trafficking and sex trafficking, and so it's incredibly nuanced. We are low on time. Ben, let me go right to you and talk to you about SAP and what you did there. SAP had to, it's again, Germany's most valuable company, more valuable than Mercedes, Volkswagen, and all the others. You made sure SAP could defend its market leadership position by including faith in its AI. What was that like, and what does that mean for society?
Thank you. I love hearing what Ava says, by the way. Everything she says gives relevance and evidence to what I'm seeing on the ground. And to answer your question, during the depths of the COVID working crisis, we looked at our 100,000 people.
Employees.
And we looked at the competitive landscape. We didn't have an interfaith alliance, a way to talk about these important values of our civil society inside the company. Other companies did. Companies like to copy. We did. We found a way. I created a safe space to pilot what it would look like to have this religious freedom conversation at the workplace, and the response was they wanted more. This grew. We got executive sponsorship. And then as SAP is rising and differentiating itself, as you said, as a leader in AI, we had the opportunity to bring the faith perspective, that is the religious freedom dimension, to SAP AI ethics community. Result, they wanted more. That was internally. Then we started doing that externally. We can talk about that now too, if you want.
Yeah. What happens to society when that works well?
Well, a rising sea lifts all boats, we like to say. And when we were able to get Accenture, Equinix, Google, teaming up with them, we were able to create a playbook of what works. Others who had built that civil society inside their company and say, here is how it can be done. That playbook is available now. Corporate coalitions are evolving on this. We took that with governments, but there's a line that Ava says really well. No company does work in isolation. No business is an island. Here, that's very true.
We follow each other into best practices because we compete with each other, but also our executives trade teams. We steal each other and hire each other and try to do what's best. And somebody has to break the mold and show what that is first. SAP, I think, was a leader in that under your leadership. Sam, when AI doesn't include faith, when it's not at the table, what are some of the risks? What happens?
So I think it's important to understand that in many contexts in which AI is deployed, it will be trained on historical data. And two that come to mind, one that's intimately connected to my work is, for example, financial crime in financial institutions. So financial institutions will perhaps train an AI model to look through previous transaction data and find which kinds of transactions its human analysts have previously blocked or investigated, and then that AI model will go on to work out the common features of those transactions and then automatically block or flag for investigation those transactions, which could be flagged for sanctions purposes, money laundering, but generally for being suspicious in some way. And we know that part of the transaction data that they're being trained on is going to be geographical data, so addresses, it's going to be names, surnames, and we know that, for example, these kinds of data, even the bank that you bank with, these kinds of data actually contain or sometimes just stand as a proxy for religion. So we know that, implementing an AI model in the context of, for example, a financial institution to detect financial crime can have enormous benefits for efficiency, and it's very, very commercially valuable as an idea, but it comes with risks that I would call basically human rights risks, that it is encoding effectively religious prejudice in the way that it's being trained. So it's not also a set and forget situation. The solution is not, I think Ben is going to elaborate on this in a minute, but it's not kind of set and forget. You can't simply say, well, we're going to set the AI up in a way that sort of negates this from the beginning, because as the AI is learning and evolving throughout its deployment, it may develop tendencies that you did not expect, that you did not set. And therefore, you need robust model design, but also robust model governance and ongoing management.
So I have a follow-on question for you and then closing words from Ben. Yep. We can spend days on this, clearly. We're just showing you what this conversation looks like. You're talking about, so take India, for example. I love India. I lived there for 10 years. It's the home of my heart. If a last name denotes caste or religion in a pluralistic society like that society hardens and becomes nationalistic or ties its nationalism to one particular faith, and you have a history where lenders didn't give consumer loans to people with a low caste last name or a Christian name or Muslim name, or in the country next door, a Hindu wouldn't be able to get a loan from underwriters because it doesn't feel good to me. What you're saying is if AI isn't careful, as lending automates, you can automate the worst discrimination. You can automate everything this movement stands against. Can we appreciate the importance of what he's saying to us? We can talk about our freedoms day and night, and meanwhile the algorithms just decide, a nice Muslim boy from Myanmar need not get a loan, and we think we're doing it right. Brutal. Ben, talk to us about the faith and AI network and where this conversation is going in the last minute that we have.
Here we go.
Thank you.
Responsible AI principles. Yes, there's an AI and faith network. Reverend Dr. May spoke about this before. This is a group, a coalition. All right. Responsible AI. You, Uriel, Mariana, Dr. Chris, everyone who has spoken today has mentioned one of the 6 principles of responsible AI: fairness, accountability, transparency, safety, security, sustainability. Why are those important? That's the language that we are bringing to the business world for responsible AI. That's the interface for religious freedom when it comes here. All right, the examples that we were giving before. You would be surprised, and I hope you feel encouraged, if you could see what I see, how willing and interested corporate executives are to put budgets on not just their own time and resources, but to fund the movements of religious freedom inside their companies. I've seen it at SAP. Why do they do this? not just because it's nice to have, it helps them be more resilient in the markets, de-risk supply chains. That means respond with more empathy and agility to regional needs and crises. I'll leave it at that.
You've made it possible by getting executive leadership and by extension boards to fund the work in religious freedom. So it's possible to shake money out of these corporations, probably not in the ways that most of us think they would just give to us, but there is an elegant way of doing that. We're the IRF Secretariat Corporate Council. Clearly they're brilliant, and why are they doing this? Why Reverend Marion Edmonds Allen, who is deeply involved with this council's formation, she said, Simran, when I preach and I say tomorrow we're working at the soup kitchen, some people in my congregation, their eyes are going to glaze over, and some people's eyes are going to sparkle. So how do you get somebody who's making $500,000, $700,000, $800,000 a year, $3-5 million a year? How do you get them interested in this? Because their eyes sparkle, because there's people of deep conviction and faith that cry over these quotes, just like any of us would, that want to do more. They want to do more, and if we find a way to ask them, they all say yes. I see Giselle Lima in the back. We went and met with the president of the Panama Canal Authority, and he said yes within 3 minutes. We went and met with Dean Cole from Notre Dame's law school. He placed a Supreme Court justice. He said yes within 6 minutes, and we didn't have anything else to talk about after. Everybody's saying yes, and we have to do this elegantly in a way that sustains. Please engage them. They're here for you, and I think they're here to stay. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you. Thanks, Simran. Thanks, Ava, Ben, Sam. Thank you. All right. I'm going to call up Rachel Miner now just for a quick, she's going to give like a little preview of a discussion on media initiatives, with Tom Gallagher, and then we're going to screen a film that was directed by and executive produced by Tom, and then they can finish a discussion about media initiatives after the film. So, Rachel Miner.
Thanks. Okay, don't glaze over. We're almost there. We're almost at the end of the day. Kaylee, if you'll just jump right to the slide with the 3 circles on it. We're going to skip all of the important data that's coming out of this. Let me tell you about the landscape survey that we've done. The International Religious Freedom Media Council has one mission: bridge the divide between the media sector and the religious freedom sector. It needs to be done. It's long overdue. Bellwether is going to chair this council with media experts, not because I'm a media expert, but because I know how to find them. And in our broader work to disrupt the cycle of genocide, working with media is crucial to that larger goal. It's crucial to religious freedom, and this is a contribution that Bellwether is ready to make. Here's what you need to know about what the religious freedom sector is saying about media. 80% of our colleagues and peers across the sector say that their most important priority is increasing coverage of religious freedom issues. Do we all agree with that? I think that's pretty unanimous. We need to increase coverage of religious freedom issues, and we have a plan to do so. 60% said that connecting with mainstream media was their most important priority. So in the survey, which we will be publishing a full report by the end of this year, you will get all of this data, you will get all of the recommendations, you will get all of the contacts, and if you join the network, you'll be privy to the opportunities that come as a result of the data. You'll have more insights on this. 60% want more connections to media. We'll provide those as part of the council. 40% said that they want to promote the work of their organization in religious freedom. This is where I want to spend 1 minute by saying the goal of the Media Council is not to promote organizations. This is not what we do. This is not what media will do. You cannot call the BBC tomorrow and say, cover my organization, we're the greatest in the world. But what we will do is we will train you to work with media so that you can call the BBC, as Bellwether did a year ago, and say, why are you not covering the Yazidi genocide? Why is the UK still not formally acknowledged the Yazidi genocide? And what would it take for the BBC to report on this issue? They told us, we made it happen. And they could, as an independent media organization, do their own coverage. The UK subsequently acknowledged the Yazidi genocide. Okay, next slide, and we'll turn some time over to Tom. There's a lot of existing research and data I'm an economist. I hate duplicating efforts. I hate inefficiency. We will also share in our report a literature review of all the existing data. Next slide. Data like this that's coming out of the Faith and Media Initiative, which I helped co-found last year. 78% worldwide believe that religious stereotypes should get as much or more attention as race and gender stereotypes. We have the data. Next slide. So, with all of this research, part of what we want to do for you at the Berlin Ministerial is actually model the power of media to drive religious freedom forward. That's where Tom Gallagher comes in. We're recent acquaintances, but the reason we're friends is because of John Pinna. John is not here today. He runs Muslim for Muslims, an extraordinary organization that runs a podcast. He's also modeling what it looks like to run media in the religious freedom sector. And John introduced us. I've watched this incredible film, which we're going to share with you in 20 minutes. And through this film, just show you that in 50 minutes, which is how long the film is, in 50 minutes, you can drive policy change, economic change, you can lift societies all through the power of media. So Tom, why don't you give us a quick briefing on what to expect with the film, and then we'll go to the very last slide with the QR code.
All right, I'm happy to. Is this on?
Yeah. Yeah, go for it.
Okay, thank you. So in December of 2018, I was in Abu Dhabi, and a friend of mine who's in the film, his name's John Sexton. He's the former president of NYU and co-founder of NYU Abu Dhabi. And I was with John, and he said to me, are you aware that the Jewish community in the UAE proposes to present to His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan a Torah scroll, the Jewish Bible, as a gift for allowing the Jewish community to practice its faith in the UAE. At that time, it was in Dubai. And I just blurted out to John that we needed to make a film of that, to capture it for posterity, and actually to use this relationship as a model, especially to educate. I'm a Catholic from the West, and so many people in the West think that Jews and Muslims are always at each other's throats in conflict, but in fact, historically, Jews and Muslims have gotten along very well. And so John went to His Highness and said that he vouched for me. And my only restriction was to focus on religious pluralism in the film. And I said, that's all I'm going to focus on, as opposed to political issues or regional issues outside of religious pluralism. And so off I went in 2019, began these interviews. 2020 came, the pandemic arrived, but nonetheless, we pushed through 2020 to continue the interviews around the world. A lot of the Jewish community members who were in Dubai went home. So they were in Sydney, Australia, they were in London and elsewhere. And so the film was completed in the summer of 2021. It was broadcast in New York on 5 or 6 occasions with the public television. It's premiered in Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Jakarta, London, the Vatican. I'm trying to think where else. But it's been well received, and I hope you enjoy it.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Tom. So last slide, this is the most important. Please scan this QR code. If you want media to be part of your future, this is the way that it will happen. It's going to take you to a link of the survey where we'll get your contact details. You can also subscribe to a monthly newsletter that the Media Council will put out with updates, with contacts. There's a place to upload stories that you want the media to cover. Most important, though, you can give us your feedback on this important initiative to bridge the media sector and the religious freedom sector so we can take it forward. In addition to the film that we're screening today, we're going to put out several strategic op-eds as a result of the ministerial. We will share those with you. They will be published on mainstream media outlets so that you can say, hey, look, I was part of this, and it's in the press. And if you want to write op-eds, you want to be part of any of this in any way, the future is in this QR code. The future is QR codes. Actually, I hope we have something cooler than QR codes with AI in the future. But thank you. I'll be around. We'll be around. We'll turn the time over now to Greg to do the wrap-up and interaction. Please reach out if you have any questions. The movement is happening. We've met as a council several times, and we're just excited to work with you. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Rachel and Tom. All right, I'm going to bring up Paul Murray. I'd like to help with this next segment. Paul Murray, he's with the Global Peace Foundation. They're a co-sponsor. He's also a vice chair of IRF Secretariat. And he's got like an evolving role. You heard from the Academic Council, Corporate Council, Media Council. Paul's going to kind of help coordinate the regional councils. So I wanted Paul to come up and introduce you to him if you don't know him already. And he's going to handle the open mic in case anybody here has ideas to contribute to what needs to be done. Paul, and then Paul and Wade, if you guys have any responses to any of the ideas from the audience, that's how we'll wrap it up.
Great, thank you. Wade, why don't you come up here and have the mic too so you can help answer responses. The purpose of the regionals, or I should say the Global Religious Strategy Council that we're putting together is really to understand that every region has its own focus areas, the way they do things. So as the Earth Secretariat is moving out globally, we want to make sure that the work that is being done is recognized and connected so that we have real partnerships, regional strategies for the work that's being done, and then even having regional councils that put everything together. So the future of religious freedom, when we look at the global challenges, we need to be able to tie those pieces together. There's been a lot of great ideas today, but in this closing moment, we want to now turn it back to you and say, what are some of the things that what you've just heard, what are some of the things that you're thinking of now that say, hey, we need to do this, or we should add that? One of the things that has not really been talked about here today, for example, is we need to monetize what we're doing, because it costs money to get things done. So every region needs to be thinking strategies of how do we raise the funds to accomplish the work when it comes to policy, when it comes to education, when it comes to really the strategies that need to be done. The Earth Secretariat can't do all of this itself, nor can it do it without any funding. So we have to be looking at how do we monetize? Do we have memberships? What kind of programs that we have in play that allow us to build up and expand this work? Because I think if any of us realize over the last 25 years, religious freedom has not gotten better, it's gotten worse. And so that's why we're all here today. So having said that, in these next few minutes, if you have any comments or questions about new strategies or building upon what you've already heard, some techniques or something, we'd love to hear that from you. And if you don't call on us, we'll call on you. Lauren.
Do you want me to stand up?
Yes, please.
Hi, everybody. I'm Lauren Homer, and I probably have been in this field for longer than anybody else here. I've been working at it for 34 years, and I just want to make 3 really quick points. Okay, my friend Chris Seipel told us our future runs through our past, and I think we need to look at what is working right now in areas where we don't expect to see things working very well, and go back and figure out why are they that way. And I'll just give you 2 examples. One is from the former Soviet Union, the country of Ukraine. Like all the other former Soviet republics, got independence in 1990. Well, I'm sorry, 1992. They have the most robust religious freedom landscape. They have 33,000 registered religious organizations. So people who live in former Soviet republics need to take a look at why did Ukraine do this when so many other republics did not, or even Russia, which moved towards religious freedom, has now totally retreated from it. So that's something for the academics to look at, but also for us to look at practically. And also Northeast Syria. When ISIS started attacking Syria, the Assad regime just said to Northeast Syria, well, defend yourselves, we're not going to help you. They formed the Autonomous Administration, and while they were fighting ISIS and won against ISIS, they have the most robust religious freedom legal setup and practice that I've seen really anywhere in the Middle East. They've got complete rights for all religious groups and for women as well as men. So how did that happen? Because that is also a model for multi-religious countries, particularly Muslim majority countries, which Northeast Syria is. The second thing I want to mention is that we really need to take a close look at toxic religion, I'll call it. Religions that want to gobble up all the other religions, that want to gobble up the governance of the state in which they live and turn it into a theocracy. And have a way to talk about it and to deal with it, because it's distinctive in kind from normal religions, which are based on belief in a higher power, self-improvement, improvement of your community, a sort of benign worldview. And we've been dealing with that. So taking Ukraine and Northeast Syria, both of them are under attack from essentially religious fundamentalists. The Russian Orthodox Church is becoming more and more like ISIS, telling people if they die in the war, they're going to go straight to heaven. And this isn't normal, but we need to think about that. And then finally, we just heard about funding. As long as I've been in this movement, there hasn't really been enough money to get the job done. And there have been plenty of people working on it. And I just encourage all of you who have resources, find those people here who can really accomplish things and get behind them. I'm a Christian, there was always plenty of money for evangelism, but not for religious freedom. And foundations would say to me, well, we know we can't do what we do without you, but we're not going to give you a penny. So anyway, I just encourage you to really think about funding this, because you can see from all the presentations that this is really ready to take off.
Thank you, Lauren. Wade, do you have any?
Yes, I just from my observation of today's panels and reports, I found that the common theme was a pluralistic virtues. We all were discussing these virtues from different angles, from these different perspectives. Many countries, Eurasia, Corporate Council, we were talking about pluralistic virtues as a means to address the issues with religious freedom, conflicts, and security threats. This is important. But I think another question is how to promote these virtues, how to plant these virtues in the society, in the different countries. And we are in LYNC with our partners, area of Secretariat and others. We're approaching this idea how to plant, what the strategy could look like to plant these pluralistic virtues. So, and there is a concept called cross-cultural religious literacy, which basically creates 3 sets of skills. First skill is to understand one's religion or philosophy, how this particular religion or philosophy teaches to treat the others outside of this religious tradition. Second type of skill is to know what the other religions or philosophical traditions talking about the treatments of people outside. And the third is how to put all these traditions into collaboration. For me, as a Christian, would be very interesting to know what Quran is saying to Muslims, how they're supposed to treat Christians. I would be very interested to learn what the Buddhist community, what was their philosophy and literature teach them how they supposed to treat, not from maybe just a perspective of humanity, but based on secret texts, based on their theologies. So now we developed a first cross-cultural religious literacy advanced course for government leaders in Kazakhstan involved in religious affairs. And we never did it before. We're going to run this course in December of this year. Hopefully, it's going to be a success. We're doing our best. We engaged American University, in particular Pepperdine, local university in Kazakhstan, Caspian University, some experts who developed the concept of cross-cultural religious literacy. And if this program will be successful, our next step, desirable next step, to push this program further for the formal education in high schools and universities, to present the cross-cultural religious literacy to the younger generation, that they can learn how to communicate in the diverse world, where all religions now are mixed together in all the countries, and there is very few countries who are still exist as a mono-religion countries. And I think that to think about this strategy, other strategies, how to actually plant the pluralistic virtues would be also a great sort of the segment of what we do together.
And as you can see with the strategies, everything connects together. It's not, nothing is compartmentalized in the work we're doing here. Does anybody else have any questions? Because I'd like to make another point. Lauren had mentioned, again, about the funding. I'll give you an example for strategy. As the Earth Secretariat is building out its different councils, and we're creating these regional hubs to be able to do the work, when you have a media council that's working, the media can really help not only bring information to our communities regionally and locally, they can also help us to give the right messaging so that it hits at the heart of the people we're speaking to bring awareness. So that strategy is important. Then you have the academic council that comes in that reaffirms and shows the factual data that is presented. Then you have the corporate council that comes in and helps, because everyone that works, most people have some kind of faith or consciousness that says, hey, this is what I believe in. So in the corporate realm, not only do they help bring that forward, but they can also look at funding. So can the academic council when they're going to universities and saying, we need this publication done, so we need support in funding that. We want to convene an event. The Earth Secretariat can convene an event at a university that can be funded. So we've got to be thinking outside the box and saying, how do we monetize and how do we build up and build out what we're doing? If we have a membership base that's built in that people fund, whether corporately, individually, groups like that, then we can really expand the work that we're doing. And then by putting them into regional hubs, then every region is able to focus on their area or focus on their sphere of work. So it's really kind of when we're talking about strategies, how do we connect all the dots, put everything together so that we can move this to the next level? Because remember, religious freedom is not getting better. It's getting worse. And we need to make sure that we take the points to get together and unified as one so that we can really bring about the changes. Any other questions before we wrap up, or ideas for strategy? Because we'd love to hear some. Yes, in the back over there. Please give your name, introduce yourself, and who you represent.
Hello, my name's Henrietta Blythe. I'm the CEO of Open Doors in the UK and Ireland. And I think there are two elephants in the room, as we say in the UK, which are tricky, but I would like to raise them, if I may.
Please.
One is the issue of converts. So one of the moderators, I think it was you, sir, joked with the panel this morning with the pastors and imams, did you try to convert them to Christianity? People do convert. Article 18 enshrines the opportunity to change religions and faith groups if you want to. But much of the legislation doesn't protect converts. And life can be extremely difficult for people who decide to change from the majority religion, sometimes from their nearest and dearest. The challenges come a lot of violence, women placed under house arrest by their families, lots of difficulties. How do we address that? How do we legislate for that within countries? So that's one, I think, the issue of conversion. The second thing is, what are we going to do about the displacement crisis of people of faith who are running from their homes on account of persecution. So Open Doors has recently undertaken some research on the plight of Iranian Christians who seek asylum in Georgia. And it was wonderful this morning to hear our brother from Georgia talking about the upholding of freedom of religion and belief in that country. But what we're seeing is that Iranian Christians, converts, who are going to Georgia seeking asylum, when they're assessed, their conversion to Christianity is not considered to be valid, and it's very difficult for them to claim asylum. I think there's a huge challenge for us. I know that the refugee issue, as you say, so many of these things intersect, but displacement is a massive crisis globally. A lot of it's driven by religious persecution. And if we say we're upholding FORB, then what are we going to do about this?
Sure. Thank you very much. I'm going to make a comment and then turn it over to Wade, too. The elephants in the room are so true. But one of the great things that the Earth Secretariat does is it establishes these roundtables, these international religious freedom roundtables, which every community around the world names it what they want to name it. That roundtable affords the opportunity for every different religious group to convene together in the same space, a safe space where they can bring up those kinds of issues and then have other religious communities help support them to address those issues. So that's one of the things the Earth Secretariat has been very successful on with these roundtables, and the reason why we're trying to have more roundtables, because you have to hit everything at every level. So something like that may not be at the global scale because it's a regional or a country-specific issue. So the roundtable affords the opportunity to have that, bring that awareness, bring public attention to it, and then possibly policy change, letter campaigns. There are many different things that can be done there. And I'll turn over to Wade for the next part.
Yes, thank you. I also want to reflect on your question. It's a very important question. And from my experience in Eurasia, the legislation that would protect conversion is important, but it's not enough. Legislation may protect conversion, but if society is not ready for such ideas, it's not going to work. The social hostility will be in place anyway, even in the presence of the best legislation. So I believe it's supposed to be two energies, top-down and bottom-up. So I was witnessing once a situation where imams and pastors from one region came for relationship-building event. And pastors were converts on the same ethnic group. All of them were converts from Islam. And at first, it was very tense situation between them. And imams accused them immediately of betraying their faith and their traditions. And there was really sort of a tension in the room. However, through 2.5 days of them communicating with each other, and those who converted explained the reason and the process and answered the questions, they lowered the tension up to the point that imams later supported this group of pastors in a different situation. And when I met the same group a year after, separately, I asked Christians, are you still communicate with local imams? And they say, yeah. Not only that, we had an incident with local people. And when we had an incident, we called the imams and they helped with this situation. And I went to imams and I asked them, do you still communicate with Christians? They didn't say that they are, but what they said, they are good people. It was completely different answer than it was a year ago. So this is very important to people to meet with each other, like round table, and get educated. And those pluralistic virtues being implemented in their mind and practices. So yeah, that was my reflection.
And Greg has done a great job for us on getting this all together so that we could end on time, and we're just 1 minute over. What we're going to do is at the end of our conference, there will be a survey that will go out, and there'll be a portion for you to give your comments, reflections, but also any new strategies or ideas if you haven't shared it here or you think afterwards, because we really want your input as we build up and build out, and can then have some convenings around the strategy so we can be effective moving forward. So having said that, I'll turn it back over to Greg. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul, and thanks, Wade. Nadine, I'm gonna call Nadine Maenza. We're at the end of our 9 to 5 program. You know, we're gonna have our film screening here next, but I just wanted to call Nadine up for any closing remarks or observations you had.
Yeah, no, I think you know, I took so many notes, and you know, I think one of the imams had said earlier, it's like planting a tree, but you need to water it, you need to feed it, you can't just let it die. And that's not, it's really about, you know, the work that Wade and so many hardwired, so many are doing, come alongside people in their own countries, right? It's not my job so much to keep things alive, but to come alongside all of those of you in countries that are doing such great work, and that's really that support. So it's really exciting to see people coming from these countries, and then the people working in the countries kind of all coming together and having that synergy. So I really appreciated all the contribution. Do you want to say thanks? Or?
Yeah, and we want to thank 2 people, actually the team. But first, Kaylee Fisher here,
Who is a rock star.
and the volunteers who helped you. I don't know where they are, but I think
So let
they're
me just
out
say
working.
real quick about Kaylee. She did all the graphics, she did all the booklets, she did all the videos, she did the social media, she did the emails. Like, we could go on and on and on, and then she's still gracious and smiles and is just super talented and is the ultimate team player. So thank you.
Thank you, Kaylee. And then Sharon Runyon.
There she is.
Sharon Runyon was she's the overall event coordinator who coordinated with the hotel and handled all the big logistics and the meal planning, like everything. She came here, I don't know, a few weeks ago, did an advanced visit here at the hotel and made sure everything was set up. And it's a great venue, you know, so we just wanted to, again, another hand for Sharon.
Yes, thank you so much.
And we would have flowers, but I know they're going to get on an airplane, and it would be kind of hard. But so we'll give you a nice gift when we get back home. So we owe you. All right.
Vacation, right?
All right. With that, that's a close on the formal business program.